Hello, welcome back. In the last video, I have explained you the motivation, the why you want to do performance testing. Okay, so here in this video lesson, we are going to focus on what kind of performance testing that we do. All right, so let's dive in. So there are basically three classes of performance testing that we can do. The first one is performance test. Okay, and second one is load test, and the third one is with the stress test. These are the three kinds of test that comes under the umbrella of performance engineering. First one is performance test, second one is load test, and third one is stress test. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do in this in this table, let's try to fill up what are the goals and what kind of issues that we detect in the type. So this is test type characteristics. Okay, so characteristics of each kind of test. Okay, so the goal of a performance testing is to understand the speed of system. Okay, that means how fast the system is able to respond to a request. Okay, whereas the goal of a load testing is how good the system to sustain under a huge amount of load. So for example, if you see this picture, right, so here, like, this aeroplane is stable right now. Okay, so it is basically sustaining so many number of users. Okay, so that means system behavior under load. Okay, so the goal of a load test is to understand how the system behaves under load, and the goal of stress test is to understand what happens under extreme load. So what happens under extreme load? That means whenever I'm going to put an elephant on it, it's still not going to break down. It may be slow, that's okay, but it's not supposed to break down. Okay, so that is the understanding that we get whenever we do a stress testing. Okay, so now let's try to fill up what kind of issues that you detect in a performance testing. In a performance testing, what I would detect is probably what are the issues at a component level. So that means, let's say, just recall that picture that we did in last time, that we have, this is our web server, and then web server we have a farms of n number of app server, and then we have two database server, and then we have storage. Okay, so this was the deployment diagram that we showed in the first video, isn't it? So if you see, like, a performance test can address you, is there any problem at this level? Okay, so basically, we don't really need to test everything, all the system. Okay, so but remember, in a production system, we have to see, like, the user number 1 or user number 2 or all the users are connecting to this system, right? In the performance testing, whenever we are dealing with performance testing, our focus and our really the issues that we really detect are at the very component level. Okay, and another thing, when we are running the load test, the kind of issue that you detect are, like, what happens if 100 number of users can use this system or not. So this is called concurrency issues. And in stress test, one of the issues that we detect is that data corruption is happening when these things are under extreme load. Whenever stressing the system to the last mile, are there any security vulnerability? Are there any security issues that are coming? Because, like, if for whatever reason, when at the stress, like, if one of this server is gone down, then there is a possibility of intrusion to our system. Okay, so now let's discuss how do we do that. To understand the component, to understand the speed of a particular component, I just can try with 1 or 2 users. Okay, and then I can test, I can send a request, and then track where this request is taking time. So basically, with 1 or 2 users, and then a lot of times what we do a lot of profiling. in the code. Like, say for example, if your application is a Java program, then there is a very nice profiler called JProbe. So using JProbe, you can profile where the method is taking time. That means what I'm telling you is so much granularity into the understanding. So much, basically we can really dig deep where things are problematic. Okay, and that you generally do with one or two user, because whenever we are running 100 concurrent user, it's difficult to figure out where it's going and what is happening in the system. So therefore, to do a performance testing, we can do really with one or two users. Whereas when we do a load testing, we don't really like to stress the system on a realistically production use case. That means, like, we follow something called a workload, and don't worry about workload if you do not understand what is a workload is, because I have a complete chapter on workload, how to define a workload and so on. So essentially what I'm saying here is that whenever you are doing a load testing, you figure out a way, that is, you simulate whatever going to happen in the production use, and based on that you create a workload and use that workload to test the system. And stress testing you can do again with maybe couple of users. Like, say for example, the workload will basically follow 1 million users if 1 million users are your actual user base. But in case of stress testing, we can just take 100 user and then we send the request without any delay. That means this is not really in the real life. The user number 1 is going to go to a page. Let's say user number 1 is going to go to page number P1. Then he'll wait something, and that wait something we call think time. Okay, so that means he wait for something to read that page, and then he take the next action. He'll go to maybe page 2 or page 3 depending on what he found out in page 1. So that is a realistic, that is what a real user is going to do. And those kind of simulation we are going to do in terms of workload using load testing. But in case of stress testing, we do not need this think time. Okay, so that means we can artificially generate so much of load to the system so that even 100 user without any think time can produce potentially a traffic that is actually more than 1 million users doing the real things. Okay, so that means what kind of things that we are going to do here is a couple of user sending request without any delay. Okay, so let me summarize what we learned here. So there are 3 classes of test, and each of the goals are different. Each of the test designed to achieve different goals and different issues and different ways or different methods to do those tests. Thank you for your time here, and we'll see you next video.